What up, Gripsters and random YouTubers? Evan here for Grips.com, and I have a video that I am extremely excited to make and extremely excited to share with you guys. So for those of you who have been following along, you know that 2014 is our year. It's the year that we're all going to have our greatest results in the game of poker and make the biggest strides that we've ever made in the game of life as well. One of the members who has been following along since the project really took on full steam about a year ago is Charlie Carrel, also known as Epiphany77. So last year, Charlie found the Grips poker training videos back when I was just doing daily shows with students. We were playing a lot of micro stakes and stuff. The project hadn't really taken form yet. I was just experimenting with other things and just getting some knowledge out there and just sharing and working with some people. It was a lot of fun. And Charlie decided he was going to give things a go, deposited $10 to PokerStars, I believe. Could have been another site, but I believe it was PokerStars. And he really started working hard. He was watching the videos every day they came out. He was also playing a lot of Zoom poker, playing some tournaments as well, and slowly, steadily moving up, but constantly playing, constantly thinking about the game, constantly discussing ideas and hands with other players. In fact, Charlie is probably the lead contributor in our group chat. And I think all that time and effort and dedication spent on improving his game, thinking outside the box, and just developing his poker mind and developing his poker skills are what really led to this massive payoff. So at the start of the year, I believe it was the second Sunday of the year, Charlie opted to fire it off in the Sunday Million, managed to go on a really nice run and chopped it with the chip lead for about $200,000. So a year ago he deposited $10. Today, or 2 weeks ago, he makes a score for $200K. And that wasn't even it. He also final tabled the Sunday second chance that day, and he's just been putting up results after results after results. So I'm extremely excited to see how he achieved this victory. He gave me a whole bunch of notes on the hands that were played, and that is really the ideal way to get a hand history reviewed. So I hope you're as excited as I am. I apologize it's taken so long for this to happen. I was having issues with my microphone. I didn't buy a new one, but I figured something out. Hopefully the sound quality is okay. Let's get right into this. Let's see what it takes to win the Sunday Million. So, as per usual, I have not looked at any of these hands yet. So I'm just going to be looking at Charlie's notes and just playing things through and just taking it all in as it goes. So Ace-8 suited is a hand that can definitely flop pretty well, and in the early stages of a tournament like the Sunday Million, when there are so many weak players involved in the field, it's okay to get a little speculative because your implied odds are actually much better than they are in some other tournaments. People really punt off stacks in these things, and the only way to be able to get those punts is to be in there, giving yourself a chance to catch them. So he opted for the min raise because it's a hand that he wanted to take multi-way deep stacked, and I don't think we're ever folding to just a lead out on the flop. I think it was a good peel, but once the player fires out again, especially very hefty mid pair, probably not a hand that we're too interested in continuing with. And we see we're in pretty bad shape, and we also see that Greek playa is pretty loose, pretty wild. Would be a good idea to take note of that. And for players who are playing like smaller stakes tournaments who are watching this video and may think, oh well, it's the Sunday Million, the information that I'm going to get isn't going to apply. What I'd like to say with relation to that is, when it comes to poker tournaments, it's not necessarily the buy-in that's important that should determine your play. It's the makeup of your table. It's the players that you're playing against that should determine how you play. So if you're at a table full of weak players, it doesn't matter if it's like a 1K buy-in, your strategy is probably going to be pretty similar to what it would be if you were playing like a $2 tournament. If, however, somehow in that $2 tournament you get an extremely tough table, you're going to want to implement strategies you would use in a higher buy-in tournament. Anyway, so with the 5-4 suited, he wanted to try to get a fishy image. And also, he had identified the big blind as a fish, so he's just kind of developing his image and setting himself up to get an opportunity to get paid off later in the tournament. Jack 7. It's a good board to c-bet. It's definitely much more of the pre-flop raisers board than the pre-flop callers, and I think it's a board where we can definitely fire a lot of barrels if we don't improve. At this point, the question is whether or not to raise for value or just show it down. You could go for a really thin raise here. It is hard for the opponent to call with too much worse, but with all these chips in play at the beginning, you can probably try to make it a few hundred. That's what Charlie does, and the opponent folds. Reasoning for checking back the turn to induce some bluffs. And like I said, it's a good board for us to just fire multiple barrels on as a bluff. But once we get a hand that we want to get to the showdown, there's no real need to keep betting when the opponent can't call with worse. So I like how Charlie played that hand. I also like that he's getting involved with the Jack 7 suited. That's one of the benefits to not playing too many tables, is you can get involved with these hands that show like a slight expectation that you expect to make some money with, if you can like really think through your decisions on all the various streets. Certain hands are only profitable if you can really take time and get creative with them. Other hands like aces and kings, well, they're profitable even if you aren't paying too much attention to them. So ace queen, I think flatting's really good. At this stage in the tournament, we're extremely deep stacked, 150 big blinds, and playing through pots at a position when you are very deep stacked is much more challenging than you might think. So I think it's perfectly fine to just peel with this hand pre-flop. And on the board, we flopped a couple of backdoor draws. An ace high may still be good, but what are we really hoping for on the turn? 9-10-3, not exactly the board you want when you have ace queen. I think it's perfectly fine to just minimize the investment and fold. Alright, so Charlie interested in playing a little deep stack pot in position with a speculative hand, but on a board this connected, opts to not take any stabs at it. I think if we were going to bet, the flop is the time to bet, to get opponents off like ace highs, small pairs, but once we've shown no interest in the pot, I don't think there's any point in stabbing at it later. So Charlie could have probably taken it down on the flop, but even though, you know, Stahl Betten's checking with fives here, he may be checking with like Jack King or Jack 10 or 9-10, a hand that he's willing to call a bet with, or two that he wants to get to showdown. And overall, I don't know if there's quite enough just like air balls in the opponent's ranges for us to justify firing a bet there. We got pocket nines, always going to be playing this. We know that Greek play is a fish, so this is a fantastic spot. We have a playable hand against a very weak player. And we saw from earlier his donking range can be as wide as just like pure gut shots, so I thought Charlie might play on there. But even if his opponent has a gut shot with two overcards, his equity, his chance of winning the pot is still pretty decent. And with a hand like 2 nines, there aren't many cards Charlie can hit to improve to a super strong hand, or a hand that can call down a lot of action, take a lot of heat. So even against the weak players, a weak leading range, it's perfectly okay to just release. Why no c-bets? Okay. I was expecting a c-bet on that board because it's a very good board for pre-flop raiser's range, and there's just not a lot of hands that Greek play is defending with that hit that board. But Charlie said that since the opponent has shown aggression in every pot, and therefore might be someone who would like check raise on these sorts of boards, he opted to just check it back. He wasn't checking back to give up. The hand was much too strong to just fold to a bet on the turn. And Charlie managed to get both max value from this hand by checking back and calling the turn bet. And also he was able to show down a hand that otherwise he may have gotten blown off of had he fired a bet and gotten check raised. So this is a really good example of adjusting to your opponent's style and the benefits of paying attention to your opponents so that you can play your hands most profitably accordingly. And here, getting great pot odds, we're usually going to be peeling with King 3 suited. And I like Charlie's bet, and then I like the intention to shut down afterwards. He bet out the flop to, I assume, take control of the action, to, just get value if his 3 was good and pick up equity. Like if his opponents have just overcards, they have a chance of winning the pot. But by getting them to fold, he eliminates their equity, their chances of winning the pot, thereby increasing his chances of winning the pot. Once someone calls that bet, though, if the 3 is good with the king kicker, it's not like way ahead. And it's hard for an opponent to call another bet with a worse hand than king 3. So I like that. One bet. That's it. All right, here we go, ISO in the fish again. And this time, I would imagine Charlie is not going to be folding to a donk bet. And it's so nice when you actually have the goods and one of these crazy players just decides to lead out, because you don't have to do much. You can just call and let him keep firing. I think a bet's in order, and Charlie goes for a big one because he thinks that if Greek player has any draw, he's probably going to call a bet, but he won't be able to call another bet if he misses his draw. So if he's only going to call one bet, might as well make it as big as possible and then go for the rest on the river. And it looks like his assessment was pretty much spot on, and he was able to maximize his value. I think with 6-7 suited, you can go either way here. You don't necessarily have to try to isolate out of the big blind. It's because in a tournament like this, a lot of people, when they limp, aren't intending on just folding to a bet. They really want to see flops. So in this spot, you're inviting yourself to play a pot out of position with 7 high. Now, if we're to hit a flop like really strongly, it's going to be nice to have built up the pot and enable ourselves to win a bigger pot. And so I think this is something that is worth discussing. The merits of trying to grow a pot with a speculative hand, even if you know you're going to be playing out of position, versus the merits of just seeing the flop for as cheap as possible and keeping stacks as deep as possible. So I'd be really interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that topic. Because with certain boards, we can just take it down with the C-bet, and if the strategy is to raise pre and then just fire one bet on the right board textures and only really fire multiple shells when we pick up a lot of equity, there can be a lot of value to just building up pots and isolating against weak players and taking the lead against weak players. It's one of those flops where, well, we're not really sure. We flopped a piece, but there are a lot of draws and a lot of other hands that could have connected with this flop. And even though we flopped a piece, our equity isn't that strong. Charlie recognizes this and just kind of tries to take his hand to showdown. I think getting these odds, wow. Hard to fold to a player that weak, but I guess Charlie just doesn't beat much on the end. I like that the intention was to just try to get the hand to showdown. That's often what you want to do when you flop a marginal piece. And sometimes your opponents just don't allow you to do so. try to work our way to a big pot. 'Cause you guys are like, man, 15 minutes in. When are we going to get to 20K? So with the Jack-10 off here, it is a bit of a loose open, but we're dealing with a fishy player, and you want to play as many pots with the weaker players as possible because they are going to be your easiest source of chips. Obviously, you want to chip up in tournaments, and if you can find people who are going to give away their chips much more easily and not make you work as hard for them, they're the ones you want to get involved with. We do have an ace-high board, which is good for the pre-flop raiser, but we also do have 3 players in the mix, so I like that Charlie just checked and gave up on the hand. Sometimes even when you hit a good board texture, you have to look at how many other players are involved in the pot to decide whether or not it's a profitable bet. Obviously, when you c-bet, you're making a bet because you believe it will go through and be successful a certain percentage of the time. It will work at a certain frequency. And in a heads-up pot, when you're up against only one player, your c-bet is probably going to work much more often than when you're up against 3 players or 4 players, because the more players that see a flop, the more likely it is someone caught a big enough piece of the board to justify giving action, to warrant putting chips in the pot and continuing on to see later streets. The less frequently your c-bet's going to be successful, the less profitable it's going to be, and it may even become unprofitable. So I like Charlie adjusting there to the fact that 4 players were in the pot with him and not just blindly firing a c-bet. Here's another one of those spots where the board texture just really hits a lot of hands. Makes a lot of gut shots, a lot of straight draws, a lot of pairs. Just there's so much going on, and we have none of it. There's no need to fire chips after that pot. Being said, we could also ask whether or not ace-jack is a hand that needs to be opened from early position. Ace-queen, definitely. And against a fishy player, bet for value, bet for value, bet for value is the intention. But sometimes things don't go according to plan. Here, we fired at our c-bet, and Rudy, well, he's all in. After limping and calling. So, wow. Tough spot. Very tough spot. The hands that have us in bad shape are obviously deuces, jacks, queens, and queen-jack. Don't think queens or jacks are very likely, as they would have been raised pre-flop. So it's really deuces or queen-jack that we have to worry about. In the notes, it says that this player slow played a set on the second hand, which means he may play hands a little tricky. It's a very challenging spot. The line looks, if he's a very passive player, this is actually going to be a strong hand more often than not. If he's the kind of player who just likes to see a lot of flops and likes to call down, but only gives aggressive action when he really has it, that may make this into a fold. If he's more of an aggressive aggro fish, then we're it might become more of a call. Often this is going to be a flush draw, but with us holding the ace of clubs, that greatly decreases the chances that our opponent has a flush draw. We are ahead of 10-9 of clubs, king 10 of clubs, 10-8 of clubs, and really any clubs. Quite challenging. Anyway, it's hard to fold top pair, top kicker against a very weak player. And Charlie decides that when someone's a weak player, he ain't folding top. And this is why we can't fold that shit. And this is why the Sunday Million has a lot of value. And, people are like, oh man, like $200 tournament must be tough. No. When you get a field of 8,000 players, you're going to have a lot of weak players in the mix. This is just one of the wild things that you will see. So, the final analysis of Charlie said there were just so few value hands that actually had him beat, as we mentioned, especially when queens and jacks would raise pre-flop. and that with so many draws possible, he decided to call. Clearly, his opponent didn't even have any of that, and we won our first big pot, up to 18K. Here Charlie raises with threes and getting infinite odds, in position, deep stack. We're going to see that flop. And Charlie decides to go for the raise on the king high dry flop. This is a play that I've been noticing a lot of guys doing in the videos, and I think it has a lot of merit. When dealing with someone who's going to 3-bet somewhat wide, you know, not just the old 10s plus and ace kings, ace queens, but, you know, going to throw in some suited connectors, some random broadways. On these boards where they're going to be c-betting all the time, because it's a great board for the pre-flop 3-better, but they're not going to have super strong hands that often, it's worth taking a shot to take it down. He's only risking 2240 to win about 2240. Needs to work half the time. And clearly this was one of those times. All right. And you see that when Charlie gets involved in a pot, he doesn't just release too easily. He's willing to fight over his pots, and that is a great quality to have as a tournament player. I think there might be some value to raising instead of just calling here, just to knock the big blind out of the pot. If we go back and look at it, the big blind's getting really, really, really good odds, so he can get in there with like any kind of junky hand. Whereas if Charlie even made it like 900, Payne 822 is going to be continuing with fewer hands, and Charlie's just going to lock up greater equity in the pot. Because, as I mentioned at the start of the video, your odds of winning against one player are way better than your odds of winning against 2 or 3 players, even when you have a hand like aces. So, small raise there just to lock up the equity is probably the optimal play. Nice low board, and it's important to notice the difference between a 7-8-9 two-suit board and a 7-5-3 two-suit board. Think about what kind of hands your opponent is calling with from the big blind, and then you'll realize why a 7-8-9 board is way more dangerous or more likely to see your opponent play back than a 7-5-3 board. All right. I think here we just call. Bugs Master could be flatting weak, but he could be flatting strong. He could be like trapping us, and just with knowing so little and the fact that it's going to be a dry side pot, I think we can call and just, you know, put in no money post flop. But Charlie goes the other way. He thinks that Bugs Master, or maybe he's just spinning that on its head. Thinks Bugs Master's calling like medium strength. Could be good strength. Could be fucking ace king. I don't know. But he builds up a side pot in his attempt to isolate in case Bugs doesn't fold, and then we'll get more credit for having a strong hand when he c-bets. And notice he only bet 1,800 there. Very small to win. 3,600 right away, plus another 3K free roll on the side. And that free roll, we got it. Send it. Charlie on that building grind, and that building grind gonna get a whole lot better because he just got a pocket ace, man. Pocket ace. Let's go. Beautiful. Is there anything more beautiful than having a limp? Just knowing you're gonna get action when you got aces. Fantastic. Probably just Charlie goes bigger. I was thinking 3x, but when someone limps, if it's that type of player you know likes to see flops, go ahead and make it big. They're going to call anyway. You might as well get as much money as you can in pre-flop. And the flop is a great spot to c-bet because we've got 2 aces. On the turn, things are getting a little more interesting. The 10 improves some of the hands that he would peel with on the flop, so If he, called with like 9-8 or 7-8 or 6-7 or 5-6, he's improved to a straight draw to go with his pair, which means he'll probably call another bet. If he has 9-10, obviously he's improved to two pair. If he had Jack-10, or actually that's probably the only one, he's also improved to a pair. Hands that will call. Question is, if we get check raised, do we know what to do? If the answer is yes, and we're comfortable folding, then that's fine. We can bet for value to extract value from those hands we're ahead of, and fold against those hands that have us beat, where our equity is pretty small, like 10% or so. So Charlie bets, ready to fold to a raise. I just looked through the notes, and they're pretty similar analysis. And the river, I'd say the river is a rather good card for us. It decreases the chance that he has 9-10 if he didn't check raise with it anyway. And if he has a 9, he'll be more likely to want to hero call us because he just won't buy that we have a 10. And fishy player probably just isn't thinking about the fact that we could have an overpair. He thought that this player was more likely to make a hero call than most, so he went for full value, all in. I think it's hard to expect someone to just call for their whole tournament here with a 9. I think I like a smaller bet, but Charlie says he was watching this player and he seemed very hero call-y, so let's see if it worked out. Unfortunately not. Still a nice big pot. And it's so crucial to determine your bet sizes in spots like this where there's a lot of chips to be gained by doing the right thing. Harrington talked about this in one of his books, when you're deciding whether or not you want to bet small or bet big, what the criteria are. So let's say our options are betting 3,000 or 15,000. Those are our only two choices. And we take our opponent's range, just for simplicity. You say he's 10 different hands he can have. Just pick 10. So if we bet the 2,000 or the 3,000, and he calls every time, that would mean we're getting the same value as if we go all in for 15,000 and he can call with one of those 10 hands. If he can call with one of those 10 hands for 15,000, but he'll only call with 8 of the 10 for 3,000, the 15K bet becomes a better bet, even though he's going to fold more often than he calls. Because when he calls, it makes up for all the times that he folded. Likewise, if he's willing to call that 15K bet with 2 hands out of 10, or 3 hands out of 10. Sorry, I slightly did that wrong. If he's calling anything less than 5 times more often, the all-in play becomes more profitable. So if he's calling every time for 3K, then he has to be calling 2 out of 10 times the 15K. If he's calling 3 out of 10 times for the 15K, it's a more profitable bet overall, even though it doesn't get called as often. Also, you can look at the value of if you can get that 15K rather than getting the 3K. How much more valuable is having an additional 15K in your stack than an additional 3K in your stack? And there isn't necessarily an exact answer in this situation, but I want to get you guys thinking about the right things, because it's very easy to just go for the small value bet and always go for the small value bet. You'll get called a high frequency of the time. But although it may be scary or seem risky to go for the big bet because it sucks to not get paid off when you have that hand that you know to be the best hand, it may be worth going for it because the times that it does work out, the payoff is so much more significant than the times than the little value you would get when your opponent calls you every time. Anyway, this time Bugsmaster did not make the call, but Charlie has built his stack up to 30,000. pretty good for the 125, 250 blind level in the tournament. So already I've seen some cool stuff from Charlie, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the rest of this video. I feel it's probably going to be a 6-part series, and I'm sure you guys are going to be alright with it because, I mean, fuck. To learn how to win the Sunday Million, I'd watch a 12-part series if that's what it took, because just to see that it's possible to win 200,000 is awesome, but then to get a walkthrough of exactly how to win 200,000 when luck's on your side, I think that's pretty awesome. So I'm really excited to share this review with you guys, to go through the learning process of it together. And I also just want to mention how thankful I am to everyone who has been playing out there, getting out there on the tables, playing tournaments, getting results, and sending in those hand histories. Because this project wouldn't be what it is without your guys' efforts, without you guys taking the knowledge that I share with you, applying it to your own games, and going out and getting results of your own, so that we can all have more to learn from. So I'm really thankful for what you guys do. I'm really happy with how hard you try, how much effort you put in, and I'm excited to see you guys do more of it. And yeah, I'm really proud of everyone for what they've done and what they continue to do. So feel free to get chatting in the comments. Was interested in what you guys thought about the 6-7 suited hand, out of position in specific, and hope you guys are excited for the rest of the series as I am. This has been Evan for Grips.com. Been a pleasure as always. Now take what you learned, go out there, and get stacking.